Hi everyone, today I will be presenting about Yoruba culture, theater, and dance, and Wole Soyinka, a Nigerian playwright who is perhaps the most famous Yoruba dramatist. So, who are the Yoruba? They are an ethnic group in Africa that resides in modern-day Nigeria, Togo, and Benin, in an area called Yorubaland. There are around 55 million Yorubas, making it the largest ethnic group in Africa. There is also an incredibly large Yoruba diaspora spread around the world, mostly in Central and South America, due to the slave trade that captured mostly Yorubas. Today, the Nigerian city of Lagos is the most prominent and populous city in Yorubaland, as well as on the African continent. But this was not always the case. Historically, the city of Ile-Ife was the legendary origin and heart of Yorubaland. Many brass, clay, and stone sculptures have been found around the area in modern day, depicting figures and scenes from this great city. There are many different creation myths of the Yoruba people, but they all center around a myth descended from Yoruba oral tradition, and they all take place in Ile-Ife. According to tradition, Olorun, meaning sky god, let down a chain from the heavens to the earth, which was still all water. A man named Ududua descended, carrying with him a rooster, some dirt, and a palm kernel. Oduduwa threw the dirt in the water, and the rooster scratched it to become land. And the palm tree grew from it and grew 16 different branches representing the 16 original kingdoms in Yorubaland. Oduduwa himself became the king, or Oba, of the original city called Ile-Ife, and his sons ruled each of the 16 kingdoms. The general structure of these kingdoms persisted until recent history, and in fact this divide had led to rapid urbanization long ago in Yorubaland. Each kingdom was ruled independently, and they were each organized around powerful city-states centered around an Oba, or king. This centering, along with a strict hierarchy of administration, led each kingdom to rapidly collect around the city-state and urbanize. Now, let's discuss Yoruba culture, beginning with religion. The Yoruba are a deeply religious population, with religion factoring into many aspects of social life, as we will see later in our discussion about festivals. Nowadays, around half of the Yoruba people practice the traditional Yoruba religion, while half practice either Christianity or Islam due to the foreign influence. Due to the outsized impact of Yoruba religion and folklore on the dance and theater of Yoruba, we must familiarize ourselves with the general structure of the religion. In the traditional Yoruba religion, there is one all-powerful god called Olorun, the owner of the heavens. But Olorun also takes on other manifestations such as Olodumare, the creative form, and Olufin, the conduit between heaven and earth. There are also other gods like Oshumare, the god of rainbows, and Obatala, the god of clarity and creativity. Underneath these gods, there are many deities called Orishas, which are various godly avatars of spirits such as Shango, the god of thunder and lightning, and his wife Oshun, the god of pleasure. Oshun, in fact, is prevalent across the world with many followers, especially in Brazil and Cuba. She is also the deity that Beyoncé portrays in her famous music video, Hold Up. These religious figures are often the focus of Yoruba festivals too. Yoruba culture is rich, exuberant, and ceremonial, so they have colorful festivals and celebrations for all major events. These festivals are a strong facet of social life in Yorubaland, both traditionally and in the modern day. Some examples of these events that will have festivals are wedding ceremonies, naming ceremonies, funerals, housewarmings, New Yam festival, harvest ceremonies, births, the promotion of a new Oba or public figure, and then, of course, spiritual and religious festivals such as those dedicated to the different Orisha. The Oshun festival, for example, is celebrated in August and attracts thousands of Oshun worshippers around the world, lasting for 2 weeks of song, dance, and other festivities. One of the largest festivals is Eyo, also called the Adamu Orisha play. This festival is unique to Lagos and originated from the need to escort the soul of the departed Lagos Oba. During this time, the central facet of Yoruba dance is exhibited, the masquerades. These are tall, masked, and cloaked dancers who move through the city along with the festival. Masked dancing is part of a lot of the Yoruba music, dance, and theater. Also, fun fact, the Eyo festival is widely believed to be the forerunner of the modern Carnival in Brazil. Yoruba festivals are times of great celebration, and they principally feature traditional musicians who are known for extremely advanced percussion. With instruments like the dundun pictured here, Yoruba percussionists layer multiple different complex rhythms together to create music for traditional dances. Later, we will listen to some samples of the music, sometimes referred to as talking drums. These dances are a large part of Yoruba social life and culture. They are specific dances for every occasion and social stratum. For example, a fisherman has special dances to perform along with special drumming and songs. Another example is the festival that accompanies the crowning of a new Oba. The Oba must dance upright and dignified, leading the procession through the town. Next, the wives follow, dancing with music and steps suitable to their rank, but always leaning forward at the waist towards the earth in respect. Once the Oba is seated, his war chiefs greet him, each with their own appropriate and dignified dance rhythm. Then hunters dance for him with a rapid and complex beat to match their athletic skill. In this way, dance becomes intertwined with both social life and performance. Now let's move on to Yoruba theater. At first glance, Yoruba theater seems to be deeply rooted in religious practice, since there are many theatrical elements in the Yoruba music, dance, and especially in festivals like Igungun, Oro, and even Ayo, as we discussed before with the masquerade dancers who have rehearsed movements and dialogue permitted for them to use. However, in recent critical discourse, there has been a move to separate the origin of Yoruba theater and religion. Instead, the development of modern theater can be traced back to the socio-political development of 19th century Lagos in the hands of the British. In this time, British presence grew the town as a hub for European commercial activities, and the cosmopolitan elite class formed. This elite was predominantly made of Europeans, and drama was introduced to the city around 1880 as an evening diversion for the elite class. At this time, they featured only foreign dramatists like Molière, Gilbert, and Sullivan. After the Berlin Conference in 1885, European focus in Lagos shifted from being simply limited to commercial purposes to express colonization. Because of this, the native Yoruba people began to react against the rigorous suppression of African culture by the European Christians. The city then underwent a reconnection with Yoruba tradition, and the first Yoruba theater group was created in 1945. One scholar writes that theater in the Yoruba language is mostly a kind of opera, in which the songs are rehearsed while the dialogue is improvised. In the late 20s and 30s, this form was developed in a so-called African churches. The Bible studies and moralities performed by these church societies soon gave way to profound plays, social and political satires, which were played by professional touring companies. Thus, we find that the development of Yoruba theater was nationalistic in origin, a return to the native culture as a reaction to foreign oppression. Secondly, with the return to Yoruba tradition in the early 20th century, traditional folklore became a vast treasury of material from which to make plays. This development as the interaction between the foreign and the native has led to the modern situation of Yoruba theater. At one end, there is a theater that remains almost wholly European in theater. This end of the spectrum is typified by dramatists such as Wole Soyinka, as evidenced by his immediate international acclaim. At the other end, there is the continuing tradition of storytelling and folklore in areas that have escaped modernization, a tradition that has persisted since long before the introduction of Europeans and their theater. In the middle, there are the hybrid folk operas that combine traditional folklore with theatrical elements from the European tradition. Here we find famous Yoruba dramatists such as Hubert Ogunde and Kola Ogunmola. One example of the typical Yoruba folk operas is Ogunmola's most famous play, Palm Wine Drunkard, first performed in Ibadan. The play is essentially a story from Yoruba folklore that has been dressed for the modern milieu that has been formed by both foreign and traditional influence. Now let's return to Wole Soyinka. Wole Soyinka was born in July 1934 and in the town of Abeokuta in western Nigeria. His father was the headmaster of the primary school, which afforded him access to books from the Bible and English literature to classic Greek tragedies. Early on, he became obsessed with the link between Yoruba folklore and Greek mythology. He studied in Ibadan, which had a lively theater scene with Ogunmola and others, and then continued his studies abroad at the University of Leeds in England. There, he took his doctorate while becoming the dramaturge at the Royal Court Theatre. He then returned to Nigeria to study African drama while teaching drama and literature at universities in Ibadan, Lagos, and Ife, where he became a professor of comparative literature in 1975 and remains to this day. He wrote many plays throughout his life, and almost all of them focused on the political and social situations in Nigeria. One of his first major works, The Trials of Brother Jero, expressed his skepticism about the elite Nigerians about to take power from the British colonial regime. His later play, A Dance of the Forest, was another satire of the colonial elite, and he performed it during the independence festivals in Nigeria. He also started multiple theater companies in Nigeria, for example, one called 1960 Masks, which produced topical plays employing Yoruba traditional performance techniques to dramatize the issues of Nigerian independence. He bases his writing on the mythology of the Yoruba, with Ogun, the god of iron, and war and poetry at the center. He writes everything from satirical comedies to serious dramas and philosophical plays, and he has adapted the Bacchae and the works of John Gay and Bertolt Brecht for the African stage. His work won him the 1967 Nobel Peace Prize in Literature, making him the first Black person and person from Africa to win it. To fully understand his impact on Nigerian culture and theater, it is important to know the context of Nigeria at the peak of Soyinka's creative activity. After foreign colonial powers withdrew from Nigeria government, the country was thrown into years of violent and corrupt military regimes. During the civil war that occurred at that time, Soyinka became an outspoken activist, going so far as to hold up at a local radio station that was about to broadcast fake election results. Due to his activism, he was forced to go into hiding and he was eventually captured. In prison, he wrote a letter to the foreign press detailing the situation and asserting his innocence. When the letter went viral, he was placed in solitary confinement for 22 months until the civil war had finally ended. During this time, he wrote just to stay sane, and his experience formed the basis for many of his works that he produced in later years, including his most recent book, published last year. Finally, he was released and returned in 1975 to teach and continue his activism, highlighting the corruption that continued after the war. In 1994, UNESCO named him a Goodwill Ambassador, and then a month later, a new military dictator took crushing rule, executing various authors and activists, forcing Soyinka into exile and charging him with treason. After a few decades as the political situation in Nigeria calmed down, he returned to teach and write. He continued to be an outspoken voice against the continued corruption and unrest in Nigeria. So if I were to do an activity for this class, I would have us go through some of the dun-dun drumming performances, and we would watch videos of them, and then we would talk a little bit about the rhythms and the beats and the complex, music of them, and we would try to pick out specific beats and just kind of talk through it all, and maybe do a little quiz on some of the orishas of the Yoruba culture and religious belief systems. And that is my presentation on Yoruba land and Wole Soyinka. Thank you so much.